Diola lived like a prisoner in her own husband's home, constantly isolated with no one to talk to. Her mother visited on several occasions but never got to see Diola, who pretended not to be home to avoid her husband's wrath. Once upon a time, in the village of Ayetoro, lived a rich man named Kunle who decided to take on a bride. Kunle was so particular about the kind of woman that he wanted to marry, a virgin to be precise. He searched the whole village for a wife, and soon the entire village knew that Kunle was in search of a wife. Many women threw themselves at him, hoping to be chosen, but Kunle was completely put off by them, as their desperation proved to him that they were only after his wealth. Kunle kept searching the village and came across a young man who spoke to his friend about a woman that he planned to marry. She was still a virgin at 23, and the young man had only been able to pay half of her bride price and was looking for money to buy the remaining items on her bride price list. This conversation caught Kunle's attention as he decided to go in search of the virgin woman. Her name was Diola, and Kunle asked around the village for her and was directed to her home. Diola was from a very poor family and was the only daughter of her father. When Kunle arrived at Diola's home, he offered her father a huge amount of money to allow him marry his daughter, saying that he heard that another young man had already come forward to ask for Diola's hand in marriage and had paid half of her bride price. Kunle offered to repay the man double of the amount that he had spent and also promised to compensate Diola's father hugely for the inconvenience if he allowed him to marry his daughter Diola. Diola's father, on seeing the huge amount of money that was offered to him, agreed, as he could not pass the opportunity of having a rich man as his son-in-law. However, this did not go down well with Diola, who was already in love with Bemi, the young farmer who had sacrificed so much for her. Kunle succeeded in using his money to sway Diola's father into giving his daughter's hand in marriage to him, and all efforts by Diola to convince her father of her love for Bemi fell on deaf ears, as her father revealed to her that she was going to marry Kunle whether she likes it or not. He even went on to say that Bemi, the man that she claimed to love, was not deserving of her because he was poor and unable to provide the complete items on her bride price list. He said that Diola should be grateful to have a rich husband who was capable of taking them out of poverty. Diola could not contain her tears as she quickly ran to Bemi's house to inform him of her father's decision. Diola pleaded with Bemi to pay her bride price in full, as she could not stand being married off to another man. This broke Bemi's heart to see the woman that he so loved about to be snatched away from him because he was poor. He approached Diola's father the next morning to plead for more time to provide the remaining items on the list, but Diola's father called him a joker, warning him to stay away from his daughter Diola because the next time he sees him near Diola, he would make sure that he regrets the day that he was born. Diola was, however, standing by her window, listening to all that her father had said. She approached her mother, whose heart broke to see her in such a state. Diola pleaded with her mother to help her speak to her father, as she could not stand marrying a man that she did not love. When night came, Diola's mother decided to speak to her husband, reminding him of all the good things that Bemi had done for them in the past. Despite being poor, Bemi had always been so kind to Diola and her family. Before Bemi declared his intention to marry Diola, he had already proven his deep care and generosity towards Diola and her entire family. One time, this was before Bemi got to know who Diola was, Diola fell terribly ill and was rushed to the hospital, where she was told that she needed a new kidney. None of her parents were a match, and Diola stood the risk of dying if no suitable kidney was found. As her parents stood there in the hospital, deliberating on what to do, Bemi, who was standing close by, overheard their conversation and walked up to them to offer his kidney. His sick father was admitted in the same hospital, and Bemi, hearing all they were saying, was moved to save their daughter's life. Luckily, his kidney was a match, so he availed himself for surgery, which lasted several hours. By the time he woke up, the doctors informed him of his father's death. This news broke Bemi, who was hoping for a positive news by the time that he woke up from surgery. Despite feeling terrible for his father's death, Bemi was comforted by the fact that he was able to save a stranger's life. As the weeks went by, Diola and Bemi recovered from their surgery, and Bemi ensured that he checked up on Diola as often as he could. That was how Bemi and Diola's love story began, as Bemi made sure that Diola and her family lacked nothing. He was a poor farmer who sacrificed so many things for them because of the love he had for Diola, and when he came to ask for her hand in marriage, her father happily agreed, saying that Bemi was already a part of their family. Diola's mother reminded her husband of Bemi's sacrifice for their daughter and the fact that Diola was still alive because of the young man's kidney, and her husband, blinded by the promises of a better life, asked if he forced Bemi to give out his kidney, and that Bemi did what he did from the goodness of his heart and should not be expecting anything in return. Diola's father's mind at this point was already made up. He went on to accept Kunle as his daughter's husband, and Kunle came forward to perform his daughter's traditional marital rites. Bemi tried all he could to stop this from happening, but nothing he did worked, as Diola's father's mind was already made up. He watched helplessly from a distance as the woman who he loved was being married off to another man because of his wealth, and this broke his heart because he never imagined something like this would ever happen to him after all his sacrifices for them. Diola was finally married to the rich man, and her father jubilated like one who had just been married off to the woman of his dreams. If one was not careful, they would mistake him for the newly wedded bride, as his jubilation surpassed that of the bride who had just been married. Kunle showered his wife Diola with expensive gifts and promises of a happy life. However, things quickly changed as Kunle began to show his wife his true colors. Kunle was a very insecure man who believed that all women were promiscuous in nature. He found it hard to trust any woman and thought that marrying a virgin would be the solution to his problem. However, this was not the case, as Kunle's insecurity grew even worse after his marriage to Diola. Whenever they went out for an occasion, Kunle would embarrass any man that he caught staring at his wife. He even accused Diola of having an affair with the strange men and beat her mercilessly, stopping her from leaving their home, not even to visit her own family. No one was allowed to visit Diola in his home, not even her parents, and Kunle beat Diola up whenever he suspected that she left the house. Diola lived like a prisoner in her own husband's home, constantly isolated with no one to talk to. Her mother visited on several occasions but never got to see Diola, who pretended not to be home to avoid her husband's wrath. Diola's father, hoping to reap the benefits of having a rich son-in-law, decided to pay Kunle a visit one hot afternoon and was shocked at what happened. Kunle, his rich son-in-law, warned him never to approach his house again. He told Diola's father that he had paid everything they wanted for their daughter in full, meaning that Diola was now his property and that her father should never ask for anything again in his life. Diola's father could not believe his ears as he began to regret ever giving his daughter in marriage to Kunle. Diola could hear all that was happening and never dared to confront her husband because she was so terrified of him. One morning, as Kunle was about leaving the house, He handed a strange-looking belt to his wife, ordering her to wear it. Diola looked at him confused, but was too scared to ask any questions. She quickly wore the belt, which Kunle locked with a big padlock, warning her never to take it off until he gives her the permission to. Kunle then left the house with the key, and Diola stared blankly in confusion as she was confronted with her new reality. Diola stood in the middle of the room, locked in not only the invisible cage called marriage, but also a physical cage which hung heavily on her waist, reminding her of her husband's profound insecurities. The belt was so heavy and uncomfortable, and Diola struggled to live with it. She would stand and wait every day for her husband to return to free her from the shackles that he had bound to her. Whilst Diola suffered for her husband's insecurities, Kunle roamed freely, pursuing other women in the village. He squandered his wealth on anything that moved on skirts and spent the bulk of his time satisfying his urge with other women, while starving his wife of his attention and affection. One night, Diola waited up for her husband to return, but Kunle never returned. Tired and exhausted, she fell asleep and woke up early the next morning to realize that Kunle had still not returned. Another day passed and Kunle was still nowhere to be found. Worried that something terrible might have happened to her husband, Diola left the house in search of him. The pain from the belt made it impossible for her to walk properly as the steel cut deep into her skin. Everyone looked at her in confusion as they wondered what she was doing with a huge belt on her waist. Diola paid no mind to them as the pain was too excruciating for her to bear. She rushed to the village locksmith and pleaded with him to take it off. Seeing the pain that she was in, the locksmith quickly opened the padlock, freeing Diola from the shackles of the belt. Diola, now free, combed the entire village for her husband, asking everyone in sight, but no one had seen her husband Kunle. She returned home and met a strange-looking man who was standing outside her gate. Diola approached the strange man to know why he was standing by her gate, and the strange man told her that he knew where her husband was. Diola, anxious to find her husband, followed the man as they walked to a small hut by the side of the village river. There she met her husband, stuck in the vagina of another woman. What had happened was that her husband Kunle had an affair with a married woman whose husband put a charm in her body to trap any other man that would try to sleep with her. Kunle lay there screaming out for help as the entire village gathered to witness the abominable act. Diola could not believe her eyes as she watched the man who locked her in a chastity belt, now trapped in such a humiliating and compromising position. Kunle, who had always been insecure and controlling, was now exposed before the entire village. The villagers gathered around as they murmured in shock and disbelief. The sight was both pitiful and ironic, considering how Kunle treated his wife because of his insecurities. The husband of the married woman, who was known for his powerful charms, stood by as he watched them angrily. Diola pleaded with him to release her husband from the charm, and the man told her that releasing them from the charm would lead to their deaths. Despite hearing this, Kunle pleaded to be released as he could not stand the shame and humiliation from the villagers. The separation ritual was performed and Kunle died a few minutes after they were separated. The entire village stood there in shock as they watched everything play before their eyes. Diola, filled with a mix of emotions, returned home as she mourned the death of her husband. Although she was happy to be finally free from the physical and emotional prison Kunle had imposed on her, she felt a wave of sadness at the cost of that freedom. Diola mourned the man who had once promised her a life of wealth and happiness, but had instead brought her so much pain and suffering. The news of Kunle's death spread around the village, reaching Diola's family, who came to comfort their daughter. Her father, who was now filled with regret and guilt for forcing his daughter into a marriage that had caused her so much pain, he pleaded for Diola's forgiveness as he apologized for allowing his greed and yearning for a better life blind his sense of judgment. Diola, although hurt, forgave her father, who promised never to be blinded by his selfish desires. Diola was then put in charge of all her husband's wealth as the people trooped into her home to pay their condolence visit. One afternoon, as Diola received her guests, she was confronted with the sight of Bemi, who came to see how she was doing. Bemi did not come with expectations, but with a heart full of love, as the love he had for Diola never waned despite her forced marriage to Kunle. As time went on, Diola and Bemi began to grow close again and decided to get married. The entire village, as well as Diola's family, were solidly behind them as they watched their love blossom before their eyes. Bemi showered his wife Diola with so much love, a love that she never imagined possible after being trapped in a loveless and terrifying marriage. That was how Bemi and Diola finally got married and moved to their own house after their love was stolen by an insecure man who used women as tools and believed that his riches could get him anything in life. The same riches that Diola and Bemi ended up enjoying all the days of their lives. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should never allow greed lead us into making unfair decisions. Always remember that the love of money is the root of all evil. Learn to show appreciation to those that have been kind to you. Also treat people the way you would like to be treated, as only then would we live in a peaceful world. Every action has a consequence, so live right and treat others with love and respect. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Like, subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.